Welcome to the mini lecture for Chapter 5 on inflation. Okay. The highlights I want you to pay attention to, and why is that not working? Sorry. Oh, I was on the wrong screen. The quantity theory of money. First, you need the concept of velocity. Imagine that the economy consists of $100 worth of stuff, and there exists a money supply of 50 $1 bills, and that's all there is. To buy everything in the economy, you would have to use each $1 bill twice. So in 1 year, each bill would get spent twice. That's the velocity. It's just how many times you have to use, very loosely speaking, some quantity of money in a given time period, how often they turn over. Oh, let's see here. That brings us to the fundamental equation of the quantity theory of money. MV equals PY. Notice, draw that symbol. It's not the equal sign. It's 3 lines. That is one way of saying it's a definition. Okay, this equation, here M represents the money supply, how many dollars are in circulation. V, the velocity of money, how often each of those is spent. P, the price level, and Y, total output of the economy. You can think of Y as how many. Think of the economy as having not cars and boats and computers, but just generic output. Y would be how many units of this generic output the economy produces, and P would be the price of a generic unit of output. It's the price level in general. But so to buy everything in the economy, you would have that many units of stuff times the price of 1 unit of stuff. That gives you how many dollars you'd need to buy all of that at that price. If the velocity was 1, each dollar spent only once, then you would need M dollars to buy everything in the economy at a price of P. But if you can use the money more than once, spend each dollar 3 times, for example, then you would only need 1/3 of that amount to buy everything in the economy. Now, the concept of real money balances. You want to have cash to buy things. And how much cash you want to hold depends on the price of things. If you want to buy 5 units of output, as the price of output changes, the amount of cash you need to buy it changes. But if you abstract out from price, then, which is the money supply divided by the price level, then that's the amount of cash it takes you to buy 1 unit of output. People want to have cash because they need cash to make transactions. So this is demand for cash, for real money balances. With this much cash, you can buy everything in the economy. You can buy that much. but you don't want to keep all your money in cash. You say, well, I'm going to have this much wealth, uh, this much stuff I want to buy, which is some fraction of total output, K, which is how much cash people want to hold for each dollar of income. Let's see here. In the quantity theory of money, we're going to assume that the velocity of money is fixed. That's what the little bar over the top in this case means. And we're going to assume output is also fixed. Well, in that case, then, because velocity is exogenous to this model, output is a function of capital and labor, so you get that. This term is a constant over a constant, so it forms one constant. So changing the money supply directly changes the price level, and in the quantity theory of money, therefore, the money supply determines the price level. Also, change in the money supply divided by the total gives you the change in percentage terms. Percentage change in the money supply plus the percentage change in the velocity is, for small changes, equal to the percentage change in prices times the percentage change in output. Percentage change in output, that's economic growth. Percentage change in prices, that's the inflation rate. Okay, which brings us to here. Lowercase pi is generally used for the inflation rate. This is the key insight I want you to know. The quantity theory of money predicts a one-for-one relationship between changes in the rate of growth of the money supply and the inflation rate. Next item. Two interest rates, real and nominal. The nominal interest rate is the rate that you'd see written into a contract or in an ad. The real interest rate is how much wealth you're getting returned. So it not just number of dollars. So it's abstracted from the inflation rate. Let's say you expect prices to double over the next year. You loan someone $100, and let's say the interest rate you charge is 0. So you give $100 today, you get $100 back a year from now. If prices double, then you'll still get $100 back, but you'll only get half as much wealth back. So to get a real return of 0, you would need to get back $200. So the nominal interest rate, the one you write into the contract, has to equal whatever real rate of return you want, plus an extra amount equal to what you expect inflation to be, to compensate for the fact that you can be paid back in dollars that are each worth a little bit less because prices have not up. And this brings us to the Fisher effect, which is what I just described, that if the money supply goes up by 1%, you expect inflation to go up by 1%. And that in turn will increase the nominal interest rate by 1%, because people will demand 1% more dollars in return for loaning money to get their investment back. Next thing. Um, a problem with that is that you loan money in the future. The example I gave, I said I expect prices to double over the next year. Well, after that year is passed, you can look back and you can know what inflation actually was, and you can know that with precision. But when you're making the contract and you're trying to decide how much extra interest you want to get on top of the real return to compensate you for the inflation that's going to happen, you have to guess. What will inflation be over the term of the loan? That's this term, EPI. EPI is the expected inflation rate. Over long periods of time, the expected rate will equal the actual rate of inflation. But over short periods of time, you can guess wrong. So that brings us, actually I'll postpone that. The difference between actual inflation, looking back, and what you expect inflation to be is very relevant for theories of monetary stimulus in the economy. We'll get to that. The demand for money. What determines how much money you want to hold? Here is the fundamental equation. Little algebra. You assume the velocity here is constant, and that means that M over P, which is a real money balance, the cash necessary to purchase a quantity of wealth, regardless of prices, is going to be equal to output. L here is liquidity. If the economy has 100 units of stuff in it, you want to have enough cash to be able to buy some fraction of that, not necessarily the whole thing. Well, how much liquidity, how much of total output you want to be able to buy? There are two things you have to take into consideration. Here, your demand for real money balance will go up if the size of the economy increases. If there's more stuff to buy, you want to hold more cash to be able to buy those things. You'll need more cash to conduct transactions because there'll be more transactions. So if the economy gets bigger, you want to hold more cash, and the demand for real money balances goes up. But then why don't you just hold everything in cash? Because there's a cost to holding cash. The cost is here. Inflation. The interest rate, I'm sorry. Cash doesn't pay interest. If there's a very high interest rate, 20%, let's say, then if you keep your money in the bank, not liquid, you get 20% return. That means when you take it out of the bank and keep it in cash, there's an opportunity cost in that interest not earned. So these two items, the size of the economy and the interest rate that you're not getting paid, determine demand for cash. In this, what determines the interest rate? This is the same thing, demand for cash balances, size of the economy, but here the interest rate, the nominal interest rate, is the real rate plus expected inflation. That's just from the Fisher equation. How are we doing on time? Okay. The classical view is that the price level doesn't matter, that prices are just They're the units of measure. If you change the size of a foot or a meter, it doesn't change how big things actually are. It's just a change in units of measurement. Well, if that's true, then why would we care if prices change? If the price of everything doubles and the amount of money you have doubles, you can buy exactly the same wealth. So why does it matter what the price levels are? It matters for these reasons. Here, whoops. Shoe leather cost. The term shoe leather cost is old. You have to, if inflation is high, that means if you're holding cash, it's going to be worth less and less over time. So you have to spend it more quickly before its value melts away. Well, that means you're going to have to go to the store more often. You're going to have to go to the bank more often. There's a cost in that. Menu costs. Think of a restaurant. If prices change, you have to reprint the menus. That's a cost. The term menu cost here is broader than that. It means all of the costs of recalibrating your prices. If you have to call in all your salespeople off the road to brief them on the new prices, that's a cost. That would be included in menu cost. Relative price distortion. This is a more serious problem. When prices change, they don't necessarily all change exactly at the same time. And in the meantime, the relative prices of two things may change, which will distort the trade-offs between them, and that leads to inefficiency. The book also refers to unfair tax treatment. A lot of the tax laws are not indexed for inflation. If all prices are doubled, all income is doubled, well, higher income in nominal terms can push you to a higher tax bracket. Today, some of those are indexed for inflation, so the problem is not as bad as it used to be. Arbitrary redistribution of purchasing power. This comes from the difference between expected inflation and actual inflation. For example, let's assume you want a 10% real rate of return on your money, and you expect there to be an inflation rate over the next year of 0. You loan $100, you want a 10% real rate of return, so in the contract, you say, I want 10%. So a year from now, you get paid back $110. Well, if it turns out that your estimate of inflation was right, then you'll give $100 today, a year from now get 110 back. There was 0 inflation, and you have a 10% real rate of return, and all is well. But what happens if you guess wrong? Let's assume that all prices doubled. You expected inflation to be 0, turned out to be 100%. Well, then you're going to loan $100 today. A year from now, you get 110 back, but the 110 you get back are only enough to buy $55 worth of wealth in today's dollars. You've lost almost half your wealth. Well, that means that the person who borrowed the money from you, you gave them $100, but they paid you back 110 in dollars that are each worth only half as much. They paid you back in essentially smaller dollars. They benefited. So when inflation is actually higher, when actual inflation is higher than expected inflation, borrowers end up benefiting. It transfers wealth from lenders to borrowers. When actual inflation is lower than expected inflation, it works the other way. Borrowers have to pay back loans in unexpectedly precious dollars. So wealth is transferred in that case from borrowers to lenders. A very big problem with inflation is that when prices are going up faster, they also tend to be more variable, which means there's more likely to be a bigger difference between real inflation and expected inflation. So wealth is arbitrarily redistributed through the economy, and that has a large efficiency implication. Hyperinflation. What is hyperinflation? The book says it is inflation greater than 50% per year. This is a great book, but that definition is wrong. Hyperinflation simply means a lot of inflation. How much is a lot? It's an opinion. Some people may consider 50% hyperinflation. Some people don't consider it hyperinflation until it's thousands of percent. We have not experienced hyperinflation in the United States in, much more than 100 years. The highest inflation has been in my life was in the upper teens, 15, 17% in the 1970s at its worst. What causes extreme inflation? Governments print too much money. The way this usually works is a government will be very corrupt, and the central bank does not have political autonomy. So the people in charge of the country will tell the central bank, print up a couple of 18-wheelers full of cash and deliver it to this airport. And then they put it on a big plane and they take it to Switzerland and put it in their Swiss bank accounts. Or they'll tell the central bank to print up a bunch of money and they'll distribute it to their political supporters to buy political power. That's why you generally don't see hyperinflation in modern democracies, countries with good political control. The classic example of this was Zimbabwe in the 1990s, early 2000s. You can see the yearly inflation rate. It topped out at that much per year. I don't even know how to, whoops, I'm in the way of that. There we go. 89.7 and then just an insane number of zeros. Let's see. That would be about 80 billion% inflation per month. When prices are going up that fast, the currency you have becomes essentially worthless, and that prevents economic activity from occurring. The more modern example that I use in the principles class now, Venezuela. 10 million% inflation at one point in 2019. This is the amount of cash required to buy that, a chicken. A stack of bills, bolivars, so large you couldn't put it in your pocket to buy one banana. This lower right example leads to an obvious joke about alternate uses of the currency. Let's see, the highest inflation rates recorded in history. Oh, let's see. Close. Let's see. Zimbabwe was up there. July 1946, Hungary. 200% inflation per day. You can't use money at that point. Let's see, what else? That's a summary of the highlights. Um, is there anything else I want to touch on? No, I think that's it for today. Um, the difference between expected inflation and actual inflation will be critically important for a couple of future chapters. See you then.